From the news media to politicians, from social media to the movies, from the pulpit to the playground, hatred is engineered, sold, and spread. It is used as a tool to control and manipulate the masses. It has been this way for a very long time. It is in fact a natural part of being human and grows from the basic universal and instinctual inner element of fear. This fear is natural. All animals have it. It helps us and them to spot threats in our lives and way of life. But this fear is being used by very clever leaders in government, media, religion, and business. These four elements are, in fact, all connected at many levels. This fear causes hatred, and that hatred is used to garner votes, sales, and members. The threats created by those in power manipulate our thoughts and beliefs and cause us to hate other countries, races, and everything else you can imagine. We take sides because we are conditioned to do so. There is a route out of this hatred, and it is as old as man. It is an ancient wisdom seldom spoken of in the media, and yet it is greatly needed in our divided world. It is time to unlearn hatred. Hate causes us to despair. It takes over our minds. It grows and causes nothing but more hate. Eventually, it causes war, and millions die. If you hate, ask why. Why do you hate blacks or whites? Why do you hate Russians? Do you know these people? They have friends, family, likes, and loves just like you. Some of them hate you too, and for the same reason. They have been conditioned from birth. Politicians hungry for power stand before us and demonize the opposition. They spew forth vile hatred on their social media sites and gather around them followers. Religious leaders tell us there is but one God, theirs. Business tells us to fear numerous things and sells us the cure. They are all doing the same thing, causing division. These tactics have been around for a very long time. Today, we find them on mobile phones. But in ages past, it appeared in hieroglyphics, architecture, and books. Learning to fight off these negative influences involves more than just arguing with them. This just causes conflict. The best route out of hatred and fear is knowledge. Our ancestors had a word for it, gnosis. which actually means knowledge of the most esoteric kind. This is the story that has been kept from the ears of mankind for too long. It is a truth hidden beneath the layers of religious deceit for centuries. This is, in fact, also the truth behind the world's most infamous secret societies, including the Knights Templar. It is the revelation of the secrets of mankind and the amazing discovery of the secret of Solomon's temple. And as they say, you cannot live life until you have gnosis. Fables such as the Holy Grail, Solomon's Temple, and more are in fact treasure chests of knowledge that reveal inner natural truths about mankind. It does not need an external deity, shaman, priest, or president. It just is. Many people have no understanding of what gnosis is, other than it simply means knowledge, and leave it at that. Yet there is a deeper meaning attached to this word. It is a word that gave us rise to the term Gnostic, or one who has the special knowledge. They practiced a spirituality that was distinctly more Eastern than the Western version of Christianity we see around us today. Note that we say spirituality, not religion, for religion means to bind, and this gnosis sets us free of all restraints, whether external or inner. The term gnosis, in truth, is the direct mystical experience of the divine in the self, not a real external God telling us what to do, but an inner peace. A peace only attained by freeing our minds of hatred and fear. It is the realization of the true nature of ourselves, and cannot be discerned by intellectual dogma and doctrine, for whoever does not know self does not know anything, but whoever knows self already has acquired knowledge about the depth of the universe. So were the words of Christ according to St. Thomas, and these few words reveal the depth of the belief in this particular and seemingly difficult to comprehend system. It seems we are being told by the ancients that the most important place to search for truth, the divine, and for ultimate knowledge of the universe is within ourselves. The place to go to be free of hatred is within oneself. The goal of this gnosis is to discover this true inner reality, which also gives us an insight into the very universe. I shall give you what no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, and what no hand has touched, and what has never arisen in the human mind. These were the words attributed to Christ, and what we shall discover is that this Christ of the Gospels is nothing other than the true inner reality of ourselves. The words of Christ match those of other leading historical avatars because it is a type of archetype within each one of us in a very quantum way. Archetype because it is common to us all. Quantum because we can all make an effect upon others just by being aware. If we can attain knowledge and wisdom of this true Christ, then we shall be able to see what no eye has seen, and hear what no ear has heard. We shall truly touch what has never arisen in the human mind, because what we shall see is much more than just the creation of this human mind of ours. Because of mankind's attempts at manifesting this mystical into the physical world, he has created mysteries for the rest of us. The secret knowledge presented here would only have resulted in our own tormented death at the fiery stake had we spoken so blatantly in previous centuries. Only those who already knew the secrets had the eyes to see and the ears to hear. Men who would today class as alchemists and occultists hid their understanding behind language and imagery that was multi-layered. In order for us to fully comprehend exactly what this gnosis is, we must first understand the background and history to this hidden world. We must come to an understanding that our present Orthodox history is basically incorrect. Quite simply, over the course of the last few centuries, there has been an ongoing rewriting of history by those in power, both ecclesiastical and political. As any good historian will tell you, the history of the world has been written mainly by the victors. The victory could be a military conquest, a political, media, or religious campaign. Either way, the losers are generally silenced and eradicated from the history books, or even vilified and made to look foolish. When we are told that the war was won by the glorious and good, we must be wary of what we read. The same is true when we read of the supposed victories of, say, Christianity. We read, for instance, that St. Patrick went to Ireland and defeated the serpents, eradicating the country of all the indigenous snakes. This is blatantly not true, as Ireland has no snakes. In fact, what this little story is really referring to is the existence of a serpent-worshipping cult in Ireland from prehistoric times that were replaced by the new cult of Christianity. And this is linked to the worship of what we will discover to be the wisdom of the serpent. It also refers to the fact that St. Patrick overcame the power of the serpent, and therefore mastered it. He fought fear, hatred, and torment within his very being. The snake is intricately linked with magic and mythology in almost every culture, and it is seen as the personification of wisdom and goodness, and alternatively the personification of evil. This reveals the duality which is implicit to its nature and the nature of the energy serpents known as the Ida and Pingala, which traverse the spine in the Hindu tradition known as the Kundalini. This is known as Kundalini and explains one of the reasons why the serpent or snake is used in all wisdom literature, as the Kundalini was the expression of the path to true wisdom. This dual nature of both the cure and the killer is almost unique. This internal union has been depicted throughout history as the sexual union, and eventually came through in history as the alchemist's hermaphrodite or androgynous figure. Some say that the snake was originally the symbol of the virgin goddess giving birth to the cosmos unaided by any male principle, an almost androgynous element of creation. In truth, this is the feminine element known as wisdom. It is spirit creating the material world, which is male. Together, the two are one and they create. Balance brings something new. It imagines and has ideas. It creates. What this is truly telling us is that the power to create something new and great lies within us. But this power can only be utilized through balance. And balance can only be achieved through knowledge. But this is a special knowledge or enlightenment that can only be found within. And so we must turn to the enlightenment experience. This experience, we must understand, comes from the eternal chemical, electrical, and biological reactions to our own thought processes. It is in essence something we can create ourselves, and this is the divinity within ourselves spoken of, albeit in hidden language by many ancient and not so ancient writers. The early messiahs were gurus and shamans who understood how nature worked in their own unique way. They received their knowledge via the trance state and this inner enlightenment experience. They saw the fire at the very center of their own existence, just as the sun is at the center of the solar system. This energy is nothing more than what our ancestors called the serpent fire, solar force, or Puranic energy of the serpent-worshipping mystics of the world. Without the energy of the serpent fire, there could be no gnosis, or so we were told. It is also very easy to say that we will have this energy, but we must also control it. And what is this energy? And have scientists ever discovered it or even looked for it? Over the course of human history, there have been thousands of individuals who have claimed to have experienced enlightenment or illumination, giving rise to the term shining. As far back in history as we care to go, If it is true that mankind across the world and across time have been having these experiences, and they are very real experiences, then it is true to state that they must be brought on by some kind of energy. This energy is both the electrical charge within the nervous system to the brain and the chemical and biological reactions within our brain brought on by numerous methods of meditation, prayer, and dervish or dancing. These ancient methods were discovered over the course of tens of thousands of years and have been perfected by initiates in the depths of many cults and creeds. The methods do work. They do create alternative states of awareness via the electrical, chemical, and biological reactions that they generate. The question scientists, among them psychologists, are asking is simply whether the reactions are purely biological functions accidentally discovered by mankind, or are they truly mystical and spiritual capacities of the higher self. The answer to this can, in the end, only lay with the individual, but may have other insights into the whole scientific element of the process by digging a little deeper. In ancient Sanskrit, there is a word known as sunya, and simply put, it means zero, and is related to a modern concept known as the void. Imagine, if you will, a large sea or lake. We know in our Western world that this body of water is made up of tiny molecules which themselves are made up of atoms. Inside these amazing atoms, we discover a mini solar system not dissimilar to the solar system we see ourselves. This mini solar system is made up of a nucleus which is equated with the Sun, with electrons revolving around it like planets. The space between these mini stars and planets is the space of the void, and is no different to the void of the same space between the Sun and its orbiting planets. In actual fact, the majority of both the mini-solar system in the atom and that of the microcosmic solar system is made up of this void. Incredibly, if we were to travel even further into the center of the nucleus, we would find exactly the same thing again. Well, what does this show? So far, and for the relationship to the ancient teachings, it reveals to us the truth behind the concepts of as above, so below. From the infamous Semitic emerald tablet attributed to Hermes, and well known in the occult alchemical world. This void or 0-point energy is in fact the substance of thought. It is the quantum realm of our real consciousness. Now, to get a little scientific, this is through the entanglement of particles known today as quantum entanglement. Through this system, our thoughts can, scientifically, be entangled with other particles, and hence what we have is what the alchemists call the universal mind, or, in popular terms, God. To us, this would feel like a sense of all-knowing without actually knowing. Strange, yes, but stay with it, because we are uniting ancient wisdom with modern science to perceive in a two-dimensional state what is in fact multidimensional. It helps to free us from fear and therefore hatred, because it gives us perspective. There is more than just the US and the Red Russians, more than black and white. These are irrelevant in comparison to the whole. The world of the mystic and the enlightenment process is nothing more than the accessing of this universal mind via the ability to be conscious to the point of quantum entanglement. To be aware of the unconscious world and the numerous connections between our mind at the subatomic level and the subatomic universe. The methods employed by the adept were a heightened state of awareness of this quantum world internally. And due to the very nature of the process, the mystic comes back with visions that are on the one hand archetypal and on the other hand unusual. It is archetypal because it has been the same world over. It is unusual in the fact that the ordinary mind cannot comprehend what the non-ordinary mind has seen. What the mystic, the Hindu, Muslim, Sufi, Christian, Gnostic, or alchemist is revealing is the human interpretation of a very real, scientifically theoretical quantum world of the unconscious. This experience is what they termed the real self, and in order to escape the constraints of the two-dimensional world, we must discover the true self. The experience of our own self-consciousness remained a universal constant, just as the ancients believed Christ is all in all. The truth is that the shaman who led the process were finding ways to higher consciousness to be closer to their gods. In reality, it is the quantum side of existence that all things are created, that all is one, and that everything depends upon everything else. So too does our mind depend upon the universal mind. There can be no doubt that drugs can bring on a process known to the mystics as the Enlightenment. This is why in the 1960s and 70s, many creatives, such as musicians, experimented with drugs. They were going inwards to discover that creative spark that would be universally understood. There can equally be no doubt that these processes can also be brought on by physical and mental actions, creating neuron transmissions that affect our thoughts and release chemical hormones. But all of this is simply reducing the process down to a scientifically physical, chemical, and biological action. The question is not how the experience is brought on. The question is what truth is there to it. Is this process a truth of human evolution, and is this process being caused by the union of ourselves with the collective superconscious state or the universal mind? Are we, in fact, creating our own evolution in a quantum universe? If this is true, then our collective hatred and fears are causing negative ripples in the quantum state and perpetuating it throughout the universe. We need the opposite of this, or indeed, we need to balance this. Subjects who have undertaken the process do actually experience a great light or shining. Just as the ancients have stated on numerous occasions, and we now know to be part of the true enlightenment experience. The experience cannot be a result of man searching for eternal life, as each culture would bring about different results. This is a result of human evolution. whether the simple biological, genetic, and universal process of evolution or via co-evolved nature with the very existence of another quantum dimension. This would explain the serpent image, which has been seen as both the double helix of DNA and as energy waves. Either way, the wavy line physically manifested on this level of existence as the snake is a universal image underlying the very basic levels of existence itself. We have seen how the Kundalini energy of Hindu prana and the scientist's zero-point energy has also been described as serpent fire by others. The brazen serpent of Moses is portrayed as a flaming serpent, and Jesus is equated to this serpent. The brazen serpent of Moses is nothing more than the power of the healing Kundalini, seen in the Hindu tradition. So what we have here is a belief in healing serpent energy rising up a pole or spine that spans the period between the Old Testament and the New, but more than that, this serpent healer was there right at the start, too, in Genesis. And the woman said to the serpent, "We may eat the fruit of the trees of the garden. But of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God said, You shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die." Then the serpent said to the woman, "You will not surely die, for God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." So, eating the fruits of the tree that is in the midst of the garden, which could only be the tree of knowledge of good and evil, or the tree of life, will make you like God. That is, it will help you to realize your own true potential, to realize the God within, the eternal divinity. This is simply because you'll be reaching something that is inside yourself. The world denies us this element of ourself. Our own desires and greedy nature denies us ourself. The ancients tell us, in all good faith, to eradicate those desires. Deny the world its power over us, and to truly find out what lays within. We've either been misled or forgotten how to read the truth. But the fact is, to find true peace and freedom from hatred, we must look within ourselves and not towards others. Christianity, or more to the point, Gnostic Christianity, developed this ancient system until the concept of the Holy Trinity and was finally written down. This is the Father, which is the male principle, the Mother, the female principle, and the Son of Man, which is the ultimate result of a perfect union. This is why Jesus is God, and also the Son of God, because he is the result of the reuniting of the elements of the one God. It's simply like this. Our world of mankind is divided and can only find freedom and peace by being united. The result is that our society would give birth to the perfect state. It works on every level, from our inner selves to society at large. Why? Because that is how the universe works. It is striving for balance, and to deny this balance and create a divided world. We are, in fact, fighting the mother of all powers, nature. The Bible is a repeating pattern of initiation into the mysteries of the human mind. It is a tool to teach us about ourselves and is, according to most scholarly sources, an accumulation of other wisdom and religious nature from Mesopotamia, Egypt, Persia, and elsewhere. It is the sum of these other sources that we must now turn to see if the same repeating pattern of psychological and philosophical teaching is to be found. Similar beliefs are shared with the sacred Jewish Torah, the priestly code to be found in the Pentateuch, and said to have been given to Moses by God. This written Torah is said to have been passed through the oral Torah first, emerging from darkness. Kabbalists of the 13th century wrote down their understanding of this inner divine in a book we know as the Zohar, the word meaning radiance. And this is due to the divine light which is the Torah reflected in the mysteries of the Zohar. It is the light or shining seen when in an enlightened state. The literal meaning people see in the Zohar, however, is darkness. But only by seeing the hidden, mystical interpretation will we make a new reading of the Zohar more exciting and revolutionary. The tree seen in the Zohar is said to produce fruit through the water that God provides. God's water is called Chokmah and means wisdom. It is a Sophia, or wisdom, that will enable the tree to bear fruit, which is the soul of a righteous man. Shekinah will only dwell with the righteous, and only through hieros gamos, or holy union of the male and female principles, is this possible. And so, yet again, it is uniting or balancing the opposites that we will find true freedom. The ancient goddess Sophia, who gave her name to the great mosque of Istanbul, is this aspect of wisdom. She is the female principle seen on many levels as wisdom, and she is symbolized often with water. This the reason that Mary is often seen on a boat or as a boat. She is the mistress of wisdom, and her name means water. The boat, as in the symbol of the city of Paris, is also seen with an upright pole balanced upon the crescent moon-shaped boat. This is the moon aspect of the goddess, the negative or feminine principle. The pole is the male principle uniting with the female. And now let us turn to another great mystery, the temple. The temple of Jerusalem has been built, destroyed, and, wait for it, the Jewish and Christian faiths, not to mention the Freemasons, want it building again. Why is this temple so important? And why is it, like the nation of Israel, knocked down and rebuilt so many times throughout the Bible? There are many hundreds of theories about the temple, and we should just consider a few of them. Probably the most interesting in the current climate is the concept that those medieval warrior monks, the Knights Templar, actually dug beneath the temple and discovered some great and tremendous secret. This secret is claimed to be the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, some incredible and deadly secret texts, or even the head of Christ. As most of the world seems to have gone mad on the Knights Templar, and as they seem to be intraceably involved in the story of the temple itself, then we'd better spend a few moments considering their role in the history of it. This in itself may lead us to the real secret of the temple. In the 10th century B.C., King Solomon the Wise supposedly founded the Temple of Israel, or Solomon's Temple. This was not, as it is widely perceived, a Jewish temple. Instead, it was a large church to pagan idols. Solomon, according to tradition, had hundreds of wives and hundreds of concubines, all of which came from across the Middle East, and all of which worshipped different gods. All these gods were represented in this great center of Middle Eastern religion. There is, though, absolutely no evidence from other surrounding nations that any of this happened, and so it must be a fable, and all fables have deeper meanings. However, the story goes that by 587 B.C., the armies of Babylon had managed to destroy the temple, leaving the task of rebuilding to those Jews who were in Babylonian captivity. We would, of course, do well to remember that Babylon was often used as an allegory for sin, and therefore sin brought down the temple, and those who escaped sin would one day raise it up again. The temple is us. We are the temple. Sin destroys us. Hatred, greed, and all manner of other vices corrupt us. Cast off these sins, find balance, and the temple of peace shall rise up again. It is not up to our leaders to do this. It is the solo man who can do this. The temple is intricately linked with the now infamous Knights Templar. Indeed, it is the reason for their name, and the question has always been why. What was in that the Templars saw in the Temple of Israel that so inspired them? In the preceding years following the return of certain Templars from the Middle East, we have an upsurge in what is known today as Gothic architecture. Before this period, churches were mainly small and often of wood. Suddenly, Europe was awash with building fervor, with over 80 cathedrals built between 1128 and 1228 in France alone. All of these buildings had or have a Gnostic and mystical influence, with hidden symbolism rife within their stonework and giving rise to the great Freemasons. It is an accepted fact that the Templars were instigators in the rise of these Masons, and it is the Masons who hid the profound wisdom in the stones. Another amazing coincidence is that suddenly, at the time Europe sees a rise in alchemical, astronomical, medical, and philosophical text, all of this running parallel to each other, a vast outpouring of knowledge emerged. The temple then was not made for one god, but for numerous gods, and anyone who wished to worship their own god was in the right place regardless. This was a place of union, a joining of opposites in the Kundalini experience, where the male and female, positive and negative, were joined to bring about true illumination. It was a place where all nations and creeds could come together united. It is a great message for us today and all time. It was the mystical experience that was at the heart of the Templar attempted revival. This is what the hidden symbolism of the European churches and cathedrals speak of, that it begins within us and spreads outwards. In all likelihood, the new building influence came about through the fresh and invigorating contact with Islamic and Middle Eastern architecture and the Islamic mathematical advances which had passed Europe by for centuries. The Muslims had two sides, esoteric and the exoteric, and the buildings of Europe were now somehow matching this hidden path. We must now turn to the builder of the temple, Hiram. Hiram was the son of a Jewish mother and a Phoenician father. He was said to have been the son of a widow of the tribe of Naphtali. There are real links between Hiram and the serpent. For instance, the standard of the tribe of Naphtali, according to Jewish tradition, is a serpent, and this could have come from Egyptian origins, as Jewish tradition states that Naphtali was the brother of Joseph, the chosen one to represent the family of Pharaoh. Hiram is said to be a son of the tribe of Dan, and even the tribe of Dan had an emblem which was amazingly the serpent. Hiram is, of course, not a real person, but a symbol of a union of the opposites. By being the result of this union, only he could build the temple, and we must remember that the word temple derives from the word for head and time. We are building something very profound when we build a temple. Hiram was credited with certain tools that could pierce stone. Stone is symbolic of wisdom and foundation, and Hiram's tools, therefore, could pierce the veil of wisdom. According to the Book of Kings, the temple was built of stone before it was brought to the site. It was said by tradition that neither hammer nor axe nor any tool of iron was used in the building. So how was it built? This itself is a paradox that can only be answered by the true secret of the temple being revealed. In Exodus, Moses is told, "If you make an altar of stone, you shall not build it of hewn stone, for if you use your tool on it, you will have profaned it." It seems that the same symbolism was utilized here at the building of the temple. According to rabbinical teaching, the prefabrication of the temple was performed by the shamar, a giant worm or serpent that could cut stones not dissimilar to Norse or Celtic beliefs, where Valhalla or Camelot were built with the fire of the dragon. The wisdom of the worm or snake shamar was used in the construction of the temple. The architect gods, such as Thoth of Egypt, were linked strongly with the serpent wisdom because they are linked with the building of temples of wisdom inside ourselves. In essence, what we really have here is the temple of wisdom being built by the serpent. Wisdom from inner energy. Strangely, the name Hiram actually means exalted head of the people, and of course, this is itself a subtle clue to the reality of Solomon's temple, as the exalted head is surely the only element which can make the real temple. It is only the head raised above all others which has the wisdom to achieve such an amazing feat. But what about the supposed real Temple of Solomon? Did it ever exist? During the period traditionally ascribed to that of King Solomon, namely 1000 to 200 BC, we are specifically talking about the Iron Age. According to Professor James Pritchett, the so-called cities of Megiddo, Giza, and Hazor, and even Jerusalem itself, were in reality more like villages. Within their relatively small public buildings, the poorly constructed buildings with clay floors, the objects reveal a material culture which, even by the standards of the ancient Near East, could not be judged sophisticated or luxurious. The magnificence of the Age of Solomon was parochial and decidedly lackluster. But the first book of Kings implies exactly the opposite. So for there to have been a temple of the magnitude that we are led to believe, then we need an archaeological miracle. We need to uncover a mass edifice with all the surrounding magnificence that is implied. And yet the archaeology reveals villages and poorly constructed dwellings. No wonder that the exact position of the temple is hotly debated. It simply cannot be found. But of course there is more evidence we can show to prove that the temple was purely a metaphor and in fact never existed in reality. The Temple of Solomon has been called the God of the Temple of Peace among men. Shortening down, this reverts to Tim of Ab, or Baphomet. Baphomet, of course, is the head, which the Knights Templar were accused of worshipping. Bapha means immersion, as in baptism, and metais mean wisdom. Baphomet, therefore, is the immersion of oneself in wisdom. They were accused of worshipping inner wisdom. The true inner reality and the true and only divinity, it is the true temple. As so, the Templars were simply accused of worshipping their own head like the exalted head of Hiram, which was nothing more than the immersion in their own inner wisdom. This, of course, is a great heresy to a church that was trying to cajole and manipulate the masses through their fearful religion. This is the great secret of the Templars, and one that indicates the truth of the temple. Namely, that they discovered in that hot, humid country just after the First Crusade could very well have been found back in rainy Europe. Themselves. This self was many names, but the true self here is known as Solomon. Historically, Solomon is supposed to have been the king of Israel and David's chosen heir. He is said to be the wisest man who ever lived and authored Ecclesiastes and the Song of Solomon, as well as many proverbs and psalms. Solomon supposedly grew up in a polygamous household with David's 18 wives. His own mother was Bathsheba. Of course, this then is yet another repetition we have seen again and again in the Bible. Bath is simply house of, and Sheba is Saba, the kingdom of the Sabaeans, the serpent worshippers. So King David was married or in union with the house of Sheba. There are amazing links here to the tales of King Arthur. David basically took Bathsheba from Uriah and created his savior, King Solomon. In the tales of Arthur, much the same is done when Uther Pendragon takes Igraine from her husband to produce the savior King Arthur. and all is well in the land. Arthur, of course, goes on to marry the queen of serpents, Guinevere, just as Solomon goes on to marry Sheba, the queen of the land of serpents. It is a repetitive process of teaching, and in the Tales of Arthur, it is a tale that erupted upon the European scene following the Crusades into the Holy Land. But of course, there is absolutely no literal evidence for any of this other than the biblical and religious texts. There is no hard archaeological or historical evidence for Solomon's existence whatsoever. We must, in this context, therefore, take all that is said about King Solomon as if it were purely symbolic and therefore had other meanings. In this way, the story becomes clear as a teaching of wisdom. When the Queen of Sheba departs from her land to visit the passionate King Solomon, she is entering the temple as the Serpent Queen herself, energy within the mind. When Sheba visited Solomon, she was the peaceful side of ourselves, meeting and balancing the powerful but often fiery side of our internal mind. Together and in balance, both became strong and gave us our true self, which is depicted as the Savior's Son. But the process is repetitive and must constantly be recycled to remain a powerful tool. This is implied when Sheba leaves Solomon. After Sheba's departure, Solomon continues to write wise words, but Israel as a whole deteriorates just as England loses its fertility when Arthur is split from Guinevere. The tales are the same, and have the same ancient and sacred meaning that we must work hard to maintain balance or risk losing all. It is not enough to free our minds from the world around us and discover our true inner and balanced state. We must continually do so. The pure fact that the story of Solomon and Sheba are stories of ancient wisdom and psychological teaching leaves us no other option than to see the temple itself as purely symbolic. This secret of the Temple of Solomon was passed on to the Freemasons. To most people, the temple is of great importance, but to the Masons it is transcendent. This word means quite simply to excel beyond normal capabilities. That is, the temple hides a deeper meaning for Freemasons than for everybody else, and that meaning is even bigger than the ordinary human reasoning. We are told that in order to build this temple, we must not use might or power, but spirit. How can we build a physical structure that is just spirit? We can't, but we can build a spiritual structure with spirit. Once we understand the true nature of our own interconnectedness to each other and the very universe, then we will have that knowledge or gnosis of the very thing we are aiming at. We will understand fully that all faiths, all religions, all myths and traditions all relate to one thing, the truth of ourself. Once mankind has built its 6 billion temples, then maybe there will be hope for the world. To escape hatred and fear, we must recognize that all those external things in the world, such as politics, religion, media, and business are nothing but distractions. Feeding them feeds negativity, or what our ancestors called sin. Our job to save ourselves and the planet is to starve the negative aspects of our existence and feed the inner self in balance. Understand that the hatred spewing forth from others has been placed there by an imbalance in society. Our job is to not return that hatred, but to balance it with love. In geology, there is a rock known as a xenolith. It is a rock that has been engulfed by the mighty power of volcanic magma. And yet it remains totally unchanged. It has stayed true to itself. We must be like the xenolith in this mad world of ours and remain unchanged by the bias and hatred spewing forth from the minds of divided humanity. We must unlearn the hatred that has morphed our true reality and discover ourselves again.